All this week, we're spending time with members of our Channel 3 family, past and present, who were part of our team covering the 9/11 attacks from Ground Zero. Kim Fettig, now Kim Fettig Bartlett, was one of our key reporters assigned to cover the attacks from New York City. She left WFSB to work at a TV station in Atlanta many years ago and has now since left the TV news business. But Kim was also one of my dear friends. We shared many emotional moments together, as well as a hotel room in New York City during that time. And she is joining us now via Zoom. It is so good to see you, Kim.
I know, Kara. I mean, I hate that this is our reunion, but it is just fabulous to see you. And I think about you and all of the WFSB family so often.
Yeah, there were so many. Both of us were Cub reporters. We hadn't been here that long when the biggest story of our generation hit. And we had so many memories together, but I'm thinking back to just that day. And I'd like to know, what was your most vivid memory of reporting at Ground Zero?
My kids actually asked me about it here and there, and we've taken them to New York, or today I was driving them to school and my son was reading the I Survived book from 9/11. And when they asked me, it's really the same thing over and over. And it's that just like intense sense of sadness and shock, but juxtaposed with like this really sense of community in New York at that time. And, you know, the love and kindness and the outpouring, and it was all happening like at the same time. It was like the city stopped and you were either in crisis mode or you were in help mode. And I just feel like we saw the worst of people and the best of people. And I think that that's my most vivid memory, is feeling like this is one of the most horrible things we could ever imagine. At the same time, people were so kind and so loving, and there was such a sense of community there in New York.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and as we went down there, you really didn't know what you were going to experience. It was just a moment. But do you remember feeling excited that you were chosen to go versus I don't want to go?
I actually think that so much was unfolding so quickly. We were actually listening to, I think, NPR, one of the New York radio stations, on the way down. We just didn't know what was happening. So I don't think there was even a moment of, for me, I was young, so I wasn't thinking of the ramifications of going into a dangerous situation. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a husband. I was in my 20s. But driving down and driving into the city and arriving in the city, I think that it was just a sense of everything was unfolding so quickly that there was a lot of logistics to deal with, and a lot of, you know, what's going to happen next, and just a lot of the unknowns. And I think that if anything, the fear or the, you know, kind of understanding how big the story was didn't set in for weeks and even months.
Right. Right. And I do recall there was a moment, I think we all had these moments, but I recall there was a moment where you became emotional and you cried on air. And I remember you struggling with that. But as you look back, what do you think of that moment now?
Well, I think that that is a combination of just being, you know, entrenched in this sadness and in other people's sadness. And I think one of the things that was hardest for me, and I think the breaking point, was that hour after hour, day after day, these families were knocking on the door of our satellite truck with their pictures, with their, you know, they were going to Kinko's and making these photos of their lost loved ones. And they really kept knocking on the door, tracking us down, you know, lining up to talk to us, thinking that somehow if they got in front of a camera or if they talked to a reporter, that would lead them to find their loved one. And I think that it was just that sense of helplessness and sharing in all of these all of this family's grief. I think that it just, you know, there's a little bit of a breaking point. And the other thing that's interesting about covering a story like this is that it was really felt like a 24/7 news cycle. There was very little sleep. There was stuff going on around the clock. It was very, like you said, we were sharing a hotel room. It was difficult to find hotel rooms. It was difficult, you know, to get things done. And so I think that there was, you know, exhaustion, there was emotional and physical exhaustion. And again, just sharing in the grief of so many families.
Yeah, and I think you showed humanity. We were interviewing the DeSenza brothers, which I know you remember, just living out of their satellite truck. And they recall that moment, whereas Cub reporters think, oh no, I just got emotional. But as we look back, we were also feeling and showing what everyone was feeling.
It was just so hard to face so many family members who were so sad and had no answers and were lining up at the Civic Center and lining up to donate blood and lining up to offer up their loved one's DNA, and meeting these family members, hundreds of them all day long, I think is really difficult, because you realize that each person, holding one of those photographs, or each person who was standing in line to give their loved one's DNA, that's a story. That's somebody's father or sister or brother or mother. And it was just really, really difficult. It was, one of the largest death scenes in the world. And I think just to have that grief compounded by so many people, and then the unknown of what was going on around us, I think it was really difficult.
When you look back and you covered that, did it change you? I mean, 9/11 changed all of us, but how did it change you?
Well, I think it's that display of humanity. I think the thing that touched me the most wasn't the grief or the sorrow or just this extreme tragedy. It was the love and the compassion. The things that I look back on are feeling like your coworkers are family, like spending that kind of intense time with them and witnessing a part of history with, other people who are your coworkers. And like I said, kind of feel like family at that point. And I think the other thing was feeling the community of New York City. And that's what sticks with me, 2 decades later. People knocking on the door and saying, we don't know what to do. We can't go to work. We don't know what's happening next in our lives. So we're baking banana bread and bringing you coffee and inviting you into our apartment to use the bathroom or anything you need. And the impromptu sing-along sessions in the squares, and people just, playing their guitar, and then all of a sudden, dozens of people gathering around and talking and singing and hugging. I feel like there was a sense of community that I don't even know if I've felt since in any city. And I think it's a really neat, in the backdrop of all of this grief was so much love. And that's what sticks with me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's been 20 years. We've had a lot of living since then. You're a mother now, a breast cancer survivor. And as you take the lessons of that and now share it with your children, how do you do that?
I think one of the things is that even the darkest days, even the days that you feel like what's going to happen next for America, for myself, like I said, those people, knocking on doors and saying, I don't even know if my job still exists. Like nothing seems certain right now. And that's a theme that happens throughout life. I think when things happen in your lives, whether it's, with your children or, you're diagnosed with a disease and you feel like, wow, this seems like such a heavy day and I don't know what's coming next. And I think just the lesson of time is that, there is always that light and there is always that love and there's always that sense of community and that you will turn to and that you will find even in the darkest situation. And I felt that, I think even, going through breast cancer, like you mentioned, there was an incredible sense of community here in Atlanta. And it's that in your darkest times, I think you see the best in people. And I think that that's one of those things that is a lesson for me. It's a lesson that I give to my children that, no matter what's going on, there's always hope. And there is always, this wonderful sense of support around you. And so I think just look for the love and look for the goodness. And even the darkest day, I think is really the message that I take away from it.
Absolutely. Good advice. Good advice. As we come up on the actual anniversary, is there anything that you will do special or anything you do in general to mark that day?
Well, I always talk to my kids about it now that they're a little bit older, and a lot of times friends will mention it to me. One of the things that I've always kind of done is either text somebody or send someone a message who was either there with me that day or a friend who lived in New York who I saw during that week. I think I just always reach out to somebody who was special to me during that time.
Yeah, we've got many other interviews on the app that people can look at, but I always think of the photo where there's probably 20 of us in a photo with everyone just standing there. We were so young and just a team just working together, doing whatever we could. Stories were coming at us in every moment. We were just really living in the moment of whatever was happening next.
It's so true. And I often think of whenever the anniversaries come up, I often think of the families and the people that we interviewed, and wonder, where are they? How have they moved on? What have they done with their lives, to honor those family members they've lost? But I really do. I think about the families in Connecticut that we interviewed. I think about the families in New York that we interviewed, the families from New Jersey. And I think that they kind of always stay with me in a little way.
Yeah. Kim Fettig Bartlett, it is so good to see you, albeit over Zoom. But it's great to be with you. And thank you so much for sharing your reflections on that day.
Yes. Give my best to everyone there in Connecticut.
Will do.